The past 2 years have been difficult. I've been living in a state of discomfort. I've been living in a state of knowing that I'm going through like a very transitionary phase, I have conversations with my friends around what our future looks like. You make all these sacrifices, you work so hard, but what does it all actually mean? Come rain or sunshine, I will still stand. Those are things that you may not have in the degree that you want, but you have them. And you have space and the belief and the evidence that show you that you can want more. You can dream for more. Welcome to Mindful Mondays, your weekly dose of conversation, storytelling, conscious leadership, disruptors, system builders. But today, it's just me. We are back for another solo episode. And I always get excited for these, especially when I'm in New York, to be fair, because I always have a lot of reflections about where I'm at, where I think I'm supposed to be, but also things are starting to make sense. What do I mean by that? What I mean is the past 2 years have been difficult. I've been living in a state of discomfort. I've been living in a state of knowing that I'm going through like a very transitionary phase, I've had friendships that are no longer the same. I've had relationships that are no longer the same. How I interact with my family and with myself has become very different. You can almost tell when something is changing in you, outside of you, and preparing you for the next phase of your life. I don't have the exact wording of what that actually means, but I'd been reflecting for a while because I would say to God, I'm not your strongest soldier. Like, I'm tired. Like I don't want to be in a state of constantly feeling like I'm shedding and not really seeing the new skin come in, So I just remember, even before my move to New York, my therapist saying to me, you need to be still enough to hear God. And then I asked her, what happens after the stillness? After you decide to be still, what happens? Which is a theme that we've been exploring on the show. And the next part is surrender. After we are still, we surrender to the stillness. We surrender to whatever the stillness will bring. We surrender to whatever phase or whatever version of ourselves will emerge from the stillness. And I think that's where I'm at right now, where I'd convinced myself for months that I have surrendered, to God's plan. I have surrendered to God, and I trust wholeheartedly with everything in me that everything will be okay. But I was still micromanaging everything in my life. So I'd say, God, please do X, Y, Z for me. God, I need you for X, Y, Z. I need this to start making sense. God, I'm still now. Why are things not working out? Because that's the question. When you're still, you're expecting things to work out, right? You're expecting the promise, I guess, to come to fruition. And what I found was I convinced myself that I was still. I convinced myself that I had surrendered. I'd convinced myself. And the thing about convincing yourself is that you're only convincing yourself. You're not really in that place where you're allowing the water to flow, where you're allowing the stillness to flow to a point where the blessings can float on that water or, mix in. So I only realized, I think in the last 3 weeks, that I think I have surrendered. Whether the surrender or the stillness is voluntary is a different question or a different concept altogether. But I think I am at the place where I have surrendered to the unknown. I have surrendered to God's will for me. I have surrendered to understanding that the evidence of my life shows that things will work out. The evidence of my life show that I am destined for success, but not for my own sake, but for a purpose that is bigger than mine. I say this because over the last year, I've cried a lot because like nothing was making sense. And I've seen a lot of the comments that we get on socials as well when we speak about stillness, about how difficult it is. And I thought it was important, I guess, for me to share my journey of stillness or the other side of stillness, and understanding that even after you're still, it is still uncomfortable. Even after you still, it is still hard. I sit in a world that makes no sense. I sit in a state of the world that is scary. We're living in times or in the never again times, and you're just trying to find your place in it. I have conversations with my friends around what our future looks like. You know, you make all these sacrifices, you worked so hard, but what does it all actually mean? And the reason I say I'm in a state of surrender is because I have let go of trying to control things and trying to control a plan that I don't even know the other side of. Because when you try to control or try to micromanage life, when you can't really micromanage what other people do, when you can't really manage how politics go, when you can't really manage how the economy moves, you find that there's only so much within your power, within your God-given power that you can actually do. The one thing that we do have in our control, though, is our faith. The one thing that we do have in our control, though, is our mindset. Reframing difficult situations to know that based on the evidence of my life, based on the blessings that are now normal to me that I don't even notice that I once prayed for them, the evidence of my life shows that I will be okay. The evidence of my life shows that I will be successful. The evidence of my life shows that I am loved. The evidence of my life shows that come rain or sunshine, I will still stand. What I choose to do in those moments is completely different. I can choose to smile. I can choose to enjoy the day, because what happened was when I was in that state between convincing myself that I had surrendered and I was still, and the state of still trying to micromanage things because I was too anxious to just leave it and let it be, and I convinced myself that, you know what, what I've learned is God doesn't like lazy people. So, I need to. No, this is beyond my control. Where I'm at right now is beyond my control. The things that I've invested in a lot, in this podcast, in my schooling, in my career. I've invested and I've failed at some investments. Do I regret them? No. But the thing is, I could have never imagined 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that I'd be sitting here. And the moment you decide to be still and surrender, it reframes your mind to seeing the small things around you. It reframes your mind to seeing the blessings around you. So the moment I was still and I surrendered, I started noticing that I am living in an answered prayer. I started seeing people walking across the street on Fifth Avenue and my goodness, this feels like a movie I've watched, but I'm living in the movie. I started seeing how beautiful the trees were. I started walking in the park. One thing that I've always prayed for, the future I hope for, is to work 4-hour days and then for the rest of the day be in the garden with my children. But I noticed that I can bring the stillness of a garden to myself. So I started walking in the park. I started noticing how the trees move. I started noticing how my nervous system responds to that. And in those moments, you don't even want your phone. You don't even want the distractions, because how lucky am I to be sitting underneath these trees that know that they'll stand, surely, unless someone cuts them off. But to be sitting here and experiencing the beauty of what we call Earth, I guess, and not to sound very hippie-like, but I just noticed how the trees move. I felt the air move around me. I started people watching again. I really like people watching. I really, really like it. I started noticing that, how especially older people will walk together and they'll have conversations. They will walk and you can tell that it's a ritual, it's a routine for them. And it's a healthy one at that. I started noticing how I had not sat in a park in a long time, but really be present in my sitting in the park. Not sit in the park with my phone, but really be present in my sitting in the park. I read a book. I was reading Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda, and I love that book. The way she writes for me is incredible, by the way. I can put myself in those scenarios or those settings that she's built. It's the most beautiful thing. But I finished a book. But that's because I allowed myself to notice the blessings around me, because that's what being still means for me, and it's a different experience for everyone, but I noticed that when the bad times would come or the bad news would come, or the setbacks would come, the initial thing is to be anxious, but like I would go to the gym and just calm myself and calm my nervous system and just notice that like the things that are coming my way or the setbacks that I'm having are just merely setbacks. But according to the evidence of my life, I will rise above any setbacks. According to the evidence of my life is a living testimony of God's love for me. According to the evidence of my life, I had Psalm 23 pasted on my door. And the thing that kept on coming up is the fact that I'm always led to greener pastures, I have a rod and a staff that comfort me, which means I'm guided by a power greater than me, And I don't always know where I'm going, but according to the evidence of my life, when setbacks come, I need to remember. And I'm saying this because that before that transition of remembering the evidence of my life, I went through like, I guess, a spiral where I was just doing too much. Again, I do too much every day. And for me, stillness is not doing too much, but it's the recognition of how I take care of myself in it. We launched this incredible podcast. It's doing really well. And it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is really important. And I remember stressing about it for 4 years, right? And now when I'm thinking about the evidence of my life, this podcast is an evidence of my life, of how someone said to me when I put out, I don't want to call it a statement, but like a reflection rather before I launched it, after I announced that I was going to launch it. I was reflecting on the concept of utoma. So in my language, utoma means to start. So tomani means just start, or start. And I was just reflecting on the fact that the last 2 years of my life have been uncomfortable, and I've been living in a state of discomfort because I'm starting things that are not comfortable. I'm starting things that are, the stepping stone to the next phase of my life. And I remember thinking, or I always think that I'm going to fail forward when I start something. And then someone said, "Girl, do you know who you are?" And obviously when someone says that in my head, I'm like, But I think now that I think back, it's not who you are in the sense of who people think you are, but who are you when you remember your life? If you had to tell the story of your life to yourself, if you had to record yourself, if you have to have testimonies of remembering the little blessings that are in your life, if you had to remember a time where things were not going well, and somehow at the 11th hour, a breakthrough came when you least expected it. Not when you gave up, but when you realized that it was beyond your control and just prayed regardless. That is the evidence. I listened to this video of someone saying the exact same thing, but this was like a week. I saw the video a week after I had prayed to always remember. God always remind me, right? And then a week later, I see that video. And then it actually made me reflect on a testimony, because in 2019, 2020, so for my final year of my undergrad, I had to basically work retail to pay off my fees. And then I got accepted into my postgrad and honors at a university in South Africa. I conquered the edge, those who know. But I had to pay for my registration. I remember by the time I quit retail, I think I've told this story before, but by the time I quit retail, I'd saved just enough to pay for my registration. And in my head, I was like, I'll figure it out as I go. And I remember sitting in Jan and having to let that money go for a purpose that was greater than me. And it was for something or a family emergency. And I just remember sitting at this restaurant in Sea Point, Cape Town, and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I have no plan. There's nothing I can do. Like, nothing. I'd completely forgotten that the year before that, in December, I had applied for a scholarship. They hadn't responded yet. So by the time I had to let go of my registration money, for me, it didn't feel like my dream was over or like nothing will happen. I just knew that there was nothing I could do and I didn't know what to do, but God will work it out. I remember sitting there. I still remember the day I had ordered this charcoal burger as well because I was in my, vegetarian era. Was it my vegetarian? No. I just really like healthy food. Um, but I just remember looking out and thinking, oh my goodness, what will I do? What will I do? Right? And I'm not joking. I'm not joking. An hour later, I get a call from this lady. She's like, hey, we've reviewed your material for the scholarship that you applied for and would like to interview you back in Johannesburg. And the money that I had left in my account was enough to just change my flight from Cape Town to Joburg, but I couldn't go back to Cape Town, right? And I remember on the day of the interview with her, I didn't really have nice clothes at that point because I hadn't bought clothes in a long time, let alone professional looking clothes because I'd never worked corporate or anything that required that of me. And I just remember putting on my mom's, I think it's like brown and gold or like black and brown, like striped shirt. I still love it so much. And I remember putting that on, my black jeans, and like trying to look very presentable. Before I even went there, I thought of all the reasons why she would reject me. I thought about how I'd flop the interview. I thought about everything that could go wrong instead of everything that could go right. As I don't want to say as usual, but at the time as usual because of like everything that had been stressing me out. And I prayed and I'm like, God, go before me. I declare victory before me, victory behind me, victory all around me. And I remember getting to the interview. I arrived at 10 o'clock, right? And I was sitting with this woman and I'm thinking she's going to ask me about my grades, why this subject, I didn't get a great mark for this module, na. But she didn't do any of that. She just wanted to know about me. We just spoke about life. We spoke about my life. We spoke about her life. And I'm not joking when I say we spoke for like 5 or 6 hours, but the whole time, at no point is she asking me about my grades. At no point is she asking me to prove myself. She just wanted to know about me. And that was the point where I realized that people invest in people, right? And I started asking about her. And it was such a beautiful conversation. But by the time she said, oh, I need to go pick up my son, I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't get it. Like we spent so much time talking, but she didn't ask me anything relating to like my grades and stuff. She just wanted to get to know me. She wanted to know about my family, etc. But at no point did she ask anything that made me feel like I had to prove myself. And by the time we're standing up, she's like, oh, by the way, don't forget to send me all the details. We're going to pay your registration on Monday. Go look for an apartment. We're also going to pay for your apartment. And then we're also going to give you a stipend. The stipend was exactly the amount that I used to get in retail. That's the crazy part. The stipend was exactly the amount that I used to get in retail, obviously excluding commission. But it was the craziest thing because when I walked in, I just went there for like the tuition. Like that's what I thought I was getting interviewed for. But I left with so much more than I had prayed for. Had she just given me enough money for registration, I would have taken it. Had it just been my school fees, my tuition, I would have taken it. But God blessed me above and beyond my expectation. I got an apartment, a stipend, and a support system over and above just the schooling part. People who check in on me. But that's what I mean about looking at the evidence of the good happening in your life. Because in these moments where I'm privileged to even have the stresses that I have right now, I'm privileged that the things I'm praying for are things that I never imagined myself praying for 5 years ago in 2020. I'm so privileged because of that. But when things get tough, or when I was thinking about like this moment, because I was crying, like I was just not in a good place. But I remembered who God was. I remembered the evidence of my life. And the evidence of my life is an hour before I got that call, I didn't know what to do. And an hour later, I got a call that changed my life. And then I sat with this woman expecting a blessing that's this big. Obviously, it's bigger than that, but like a blessing that's this big. And I got a blessing of like the size of this room. I got a blessing that's beyond my wildest expectations because the dreams we have of ourselves, for ourselves, they're in no way compared to the plan that has been, or the destiny that has been set for our lives. But the key is believing with all your might that there's something or someone This is depending on what you believe in. But for me, I've always believed that God is bigger than every situation in my life. And then when I was still remembering the evidence, I realized that like my first school was Habangani Primary School, Venda. That was my first primary school right across my grandfather's house. I used to, at that first school, they had like a feeding thing, like during breaks where you'd go and they like put food on your plate and whatnot. That's literally the first school I went to. And the evidence of my life now finds me, how many years later? Finds me 22, 23 years later at an Ivy League university in the United States in New York City, a city that I only dreamt about growing up. And that's the evidence of my life. And that is the evidence that we need to like start looking for in our lives. The times where the things you prayed for when you were 8 and the things that you're praying for when you're 24, 25, 30, 40 are very different from the things that you prayed for growing up. The things you lacked emotionally, psychologically, physically, and otherwise, those are things that you may not have in the degree that you want, but you have them. And you have space and the belief and the evidence that show you that you can want more. You can dream for more. You can have the wildest dreams and know that anything is possible. And I think the stillness and the surrender for me is that remembrance. I'm still enough to remember who God has been in my life. I'm still enough to remember the evidence of the fact that my life is a living testimony of anything is possible. My life is a living testimony of how it is a story that I tell, but it is a story that I use to pay it forward to make sure that I'm not the only evidence of the fact that things are possible in the setting where I come from. And I have a lot of conversations with my cousins now, my younger cousins, and it's so beautiful to hear where we're at versus where we started, you know? And there's been a lot of restoration in my life. Are things perfect? No. No, they're not. By no means are they perfect. But I'm in a place in my life where I can want more. I can dream for more. I mean, one of the things that I've done recently is like pivot, you know? I have fully embraced discomfort to the point where I've actually switched my concentrations at school. And I've now entered a realm that is very different for me because I just wanted to not sit in the comfortable because it's within the discomfort where the real magic happens. It is within the discomfort where, you know, the small thing that, you know, that thing that changes everything happens because it is the biggest risk takers. I struggle with my S's, but it is the biggest risk takers that have the highest returns. She's a finance girly now. But yes, all jokes aside, I think this episode, my stillness and surrender, has brought back the remembrance or remembering the evidence of my life and how the evidence shows that without fail, I will be successful, that without fail, I am blessed. Without fail, there will always be an outcome that works out for my good. Whether I may not see it in that moment because there's times where I don't get things because, or I don't get what I prayed for because that is not the thing that I'm supposed to get. You know, I've now realized that the no's that I get from God are merely a redirection. And what I choose to focus on right now is the evidence. In my darkest days, I choose to focus on the evidence. In my good days, I choose to take that evidence and store it, that good is possible. Good is possible. Blessings beyond my wildest expectations are possible. But to also know that the place where I'm at right now will have a lot of discomfort because what I'm working towards is bigger than I could have ever dreamt of. It's bigger than any of my ancestors, to be fair, could have ever dreamt of. But it's a culmination of dreams that are grounded in purpose, grounded in love, and the understanding that we can have more. You know, hope. Hope. That's what my life has, or the prayers that have been prayed by those that come before me, represent. So when you're sitting at home or you are feeling like stillness is too uncomfortable for you, or you're feeling like I can't surrender, I have to go, go, go. I have to settle in my life. I have to settle for what things are. I have to settle for this thing. I cannot pivot. I cannot start over. I think that's the thing. We feel like we can't start over. Look at the evidence of your life. Look at the evidence of your life and focus on the evidence to the point where it makes you feel like you can do anything and everything. If it's starting that business, do it. If it's changing your career, do it. If it's pivoting, if it's trying something that you thought was never feasible before, then do it. But look at the evidence of your life in the dark moments. And that's what I wanted to share with you guys today, that where I'm at in my stillness and surrender is I'm still enough to remember who God has been in my life and the evidence of my life. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching Mindful Mondays over the last 2-3 months. It's been, I don't know how long it's been actually right now. But I'm so grateful for the feedback. I'm so grateful for the stories that you're sharing. We're seeing them all. And obviously we're trying to implement them, but this podcast has become evidence of what it looks like when you bet on yourself, when you do the thing that makes you feel uncomfortable, when you step into the discomfort. You create magic that not only impacts your life, but transcends your life and creates a lot more stories that can be used as evidence for the next person of what happens when you start with your why and you just start. Thank you. I'll see you next week.